Well, congratulations and thanks for coming through, Advocate. Tell us.
Thank you very much.
How was the selection process done?
The first thing, I was nominated by South Africa with the concurrence of the Ministers of Justice and DECO, and my name was submitted to the United Nations, and there were 14 candidates for 9 positions. And the candidates were voted for by state parties to the Convention on Elimination of Racial Discrimination. There are 180 state parties, so those are the ones who voted on Friday.
Did you raise your hand, or were you approached and asked to raise your hand?
I was encouraged by a retired DECO official last year in October. He told me that the position will be available in June, and encouraged me to put my name forward. At that time, I hadn't even thought about it, but subsequent to that, the ball started rolling, and my name was then submitted.
Talk to us about how you understand the work and importance, of course, of this committee.
The first thing to say is that the convention was inspired by South Africa because of our history. The committee is a treaty body, so what it does, it examines the reports of state parties on the measures that they've taken, judicial, administrative, and legislative, to implement the rights in the convention. And the committee also receives individual communications, as they call them. Those are complaints, and also examines those complaints on racial discrimination and racism and make recommendations.
I mean, as you well know, the South African Human Rights Commission had in the past year the highest number of complaints had to do with racial discrimination. Just your sense, do you think racism is on the rise, or is it perhaps because of social media, more and more people get caught these days?
I think it's well and alive, but we see new manifestations of racism and racial discrimination. And as you have correctly pointed out, the manifestations happen on social media. But there are also forms of racism like migration, which takes a racial dimension. That is on the rise in the world. Nationalism as well is on the rise, the fear of the other or protecting our own. And that also takes a racial dimension. So these are new forms, in addition, of course, to hate speech that happens in digital platforms.
Why do you think that is, though? I mean, what sort of fuels, this hatred, discrimination?
In the world, as I said, maybe the world economy does not, the economies of the world doesn't help, because people are now trying to protect their own economies and making sure that they deliver services for their own nationals. That's my own view. I mean, I haven't done a study recently, but the regulation of social media, I think it's also another factor, because, as you know, that's a space that is very difficult to regulate. I'm glad that in our country we are looking at adopting a hate speech bill, because sometimes people do these things when they know that there will be no consequences for their action or their utterances.
What about sort of like subtle forms, of racism, or statements perhaps? I quote one minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, when he was health minister, said something about how the health sector is burdened and it doesn't have money And the reality we need to confront is that we do have a lot of foreigners in the country, and they do put a strain on the limited resources. And a lot of people raised issue with that to say it actually fuels, prejudice and xenophobia.
Yes, I mean, that's exactly what I've just said, to say the issue of nationalism that we are seeing, and it's on the rise. But as we analyze statements, we also have to make sure that we define the utterances properly, because it's not everything that constitutes, or all utterances that constitutes racism or racial discrimination or xenophobia for that matter. There is a technical definition of that. And, in my previous role, I was the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information in Africa. And I am very keen to ensure that we don't prescribe all speech. We have to ensure that we deal with hate speech, but there is offensive speech that does not necessarily amount to hate speech. So we have to keep that balance as well.
Best of luck with your role. Thanks very much for coming through.
Thank you very much.